Hey guys, what's going on? It's Yuri with the GT Nuts program. So I thought today would be kind of the start of a new series I'm going to be doing. It's basically part of a bike education series for a lot. I know a lot of you folks out there are riding bikes, you know, and you kind of want to learn more about bikes. Like, you don't exactly have the level of knowledge in which would, you know, put you at an avid level or anything like that. So for those of you that are have friends that have just gotten into biking, especially during the COVID you know, lockdowns and stuff, and you know, they've been out riding and they want to learn more about bikes, feel free to share the link. This is basically going to be super beginners, so just basic knowledge, because I know that I've ridden with friends that have no clue. You know, they've started mountain biking, but they don't know a lot of the parts. Like, they don't, like, when I'm like, oh, you need this part, they're like, what is that? So today is the start. I'm gonna do a whole series, you know, on my channel, so stay tuned for that. Also share it with even your co-workers that want to learn more about bikes. They don't even know kind of what to do, or they want to learn more. So that's what this my whole beginner series is going to be all about. It's just bike education on the basics, so they can go to a bike shop, they can hopefully maybe look and have a dialogue that makes sense to a person that works at the bike shop, so they're not confused. So let's get started. This is a hardtail bike frame. The way you can tell it's a hardtail bike frame is because this part does not have an integrated suspension built into it. You know, there are ways to get around it so you have a nice ride. For GT, they do the floating seat stays here, but other ways is putting not necessarily a dropper seat post or some idiot honking, but you know, it's they have it to where now dropper seat posts can have suspension in here, so as you're sitting, there's a little bit of cushion as you know, you hit certain hard obstacles. It won't be obviously as soft as riding a full suspension bike, but it will take off a lot of the edge of the hard hits. So this kind of style frame is called a hardtail frame. So let's start in the front, and I'm going to break it down to the very bare bones. So these are handlebar end plugs, or you can call them bar end plugs. These are the ones that you can actually they're not the disposable or single use ones, you know. Just because I'm always changing out parts, you can pretty much get these, unscrew them, pull them out, or kind of tease them out with some, you know, like a screwdriver if they're really jammed in there, and pull them out, and then you can remove your grips. Here, these are lock-on grips, and the clue that it's a lock-on grip is because you'll get some kind of bolt that keeps this from sliding around. This is obviously a brake lever. This part is the shifter. It's usually for the rear. In this setup, the right side shifter is the rear shifter, and it will go to a rear derailleur, which causes this to, and the cable action here will cause this to move and put the chain and move it up and down the cassette here. And this part, all these teeth that you're seeing, this is a 12-speed, and the way you can figure out it's a 12-speed is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So all these little, what look like kind of shark fin things, well, not really, but these are called teeth. And you know, if you ever hear like 52 tooth, 32 tooth, it means that's how many of these pointy things are on that one particular gear. So this is a cassette. There's different variations, like there's a freewheel, but bikes are so Mountain bikes usually don't have those these days anymore. It's pretty rare unless you're running a vintage bike, but that's a whole different discussion. But this is called the Cassette chain, rear derailleur, and then these are called rear derailleur pulleys. This part is cool. It's a that the rear derailleur hangs on. It's a replaceable rear derailleur hanger, and the reason that you have this is so in case, you know, you're in mountain biking, you're gonna catch stuff like maybe a root or some kind of debris or obstacle, or even a vine. Even a good blackberry vine can bend or rip one of these metal pieces off. And because this is an aluminum frame, you will find this commonly in aluminum, titanium, and carbon fiber frames. Steel frames not so much, because they're easier to repair. But for any of the materials like carbon fiber and aluminum, they're harder to fix, especially titanium. So this mechanism, which is usually typically like an aluminum piece, will just break off, and you can replace it to the tune of $20 versus replacing your entire frame. So keep that in mind. Now we're back at the top. This is a handlebar, of course, obvious part, but some people don't know what they call it. They just call it the steerer bar or whatever. This is a stem. Stem goes from here. This part here is the stem. This is a top cap, and it just keeps debris out. These are spacers. These can adjust the height. They're there for another reason, and it's also, you know, just because under, like, these wrap around a steerer tube, and that steerer tube runs from here all the way down to your, this is called a fork. This is a suspension fork because, you know, if you, let me see if I can do it. You know, it, whoop, hang on. Because it obviously acts, it's a suspension fork because it has suspension in it. So, this is, so that steer tube runs down to the fork here. So this is, if we want to, and then if we want to really break it down, we can, but that's just a whole entire, you probably don't need to know that until later. And of course, this is a tire. These are spokes. These little shiny pieces are spoke nipples. Whoops. Oh, that escaped. That's okay. This part's called a valve stem, and this is a Presta. If you look at the ones in your car, or much older bikes, they'll have a Schrader style valve, but this is a Presta valve. And what you would do is unwind this, and if you push it, air comes out, and when you attach a pump, you know, it'll fill, but just make sure this is unthreaded. This nut here is in place just so, because this is so narrow, and it keeps it in place. It doesn't go back into the tire when you're filling it and kind of give you issues. So this is a valve stem. That's a lock nut, spoke nipple, spoke. All those spokes meet here at a hub. And this is the axle. This would be called a through axle. There's some old school and some entry-level bikes that have something similar called a quick release. This is called a through axle because if I were to pull this out, it goes through kind of two metal loops in this hub here, and it's through the axle. So good way to remember it's through axle. This is called a rim. So this hoop part, right, this whole entire hoop part, that's called a rim. So just remember, the rim doesn't mean it's a whole wheel. So the rim, spoke nipple, spokes, and hub together make up a wheel. You know, for those of you that are curious, like, how do you figure out tire size real quick? Usually you'll find numbers here, and that will tell you. So if you find the X, right, you can go to any shop and even take a picture with your cell phone if you can't bring the bike. you know, and be like, I'm looking for an inner tube if you're running an inner tube, or a replacement tire, and the original is this, and it can help you. So that's why I think it's important to have a bike shop, because sometimes there's parts that you don't know what they are, and and like, it just kind of, it's good to have that dialogue, like when you understand the parts, because then it makes sense for everybody. Also, I should say, we're going to cover bike anatomy too. So this part of the frame that I'm touching is called a head tube, and the head tube holds, if you see this metal part that my finger's on, it's a headset, and there's bearings up here and down here, and what they do is they help the fork and all these components kind of steer in a very and with the least amount of friction or resistance. So that's a head tube. Here, this is called a top tube, because if you look, top of the tube, top of the frame, points down, down tube, because the seat is attached to a seat post or a saddle. You can call this a saddle too. This is basically a seat tube. These are seat stays, and the way I kind of remember it is the chain stay. This part here, this is the chain stay as much as the other part where my finger's on. So chain stays, seat stays, and here would be called a dropout, like, because the wheel, when you attach it, if you were to remove the axle or whatever mechanism's keeping it in place, it would fall out. Usually, I know there's different types of dropouts. There's ones that are shaped like this, some like this, even some that are like this, you know. And so but if you say that, you know, like affectionately, you can call it a dropout. Now we're back out. Now we're on this side, so it's still a brake lever. Just of note, there's no real right way to do brake levers. Some people like to have their front brake on this side, and some people like to have their rear brake on this side. That's usually known as moto, or you know, I've also heard it called like Aussie. So you know, you know, everybody sets their brake levers up a little bit different. Shifters, not so much, because they're a lot more fixed, so you can't get away with that too easily. But usually on disc brakes, you can usually swap them out. Even V brakes or cantilevers, you can switch out your levers. So one controls brake lever, so one controls the front, one controls the back. Here is a disc brake rotor. So this is a rotor. They come in different sizes, 140, 160, 180. They fall into 200s, but you don't necessarily need to know that as you're starting out. So this is just basically a disc brake rotor. This is a disc brake caliper. Obviously pedals. This is a bike pedal. This is a remote, believe it or not. Check this out. To the fork. What this does is it locks out the fork when you don't need suspension. Like for example, I could be climbing up a hill and it's kind of slow. You know, it's a slow ride up, so I don't really need any of that suspension, because it's gonna eat up a little of my energy climbing up. So you just lock out the fork, and it gives you, and you know, gives you a little more efficiency as you're climbing. This is called, oh, hang on, it's kind of cool. This is a dropper lever. This kind of style of post here is a dropper post, obviously, because you can, let me see, I'm trying to hold the camera and push down. It can drop down. And the reason for people like me that ride this way, you know, helps keep, because if you watch my shred edit videos, I do a lot of tricks, and sometimes, many times, having a seat post high up is not advantageous to my riding. So But if I'm riding long distance, like sometimes I ride this on the road, as you might have seen in another video recently. You know, it's just a nice comfort. So when you're pedaling, you don't, the higher up you are, and your leg can properly extend, you know, it makes for a nice efficient ride. So you can do that too. For seat posts, this is a dropper post, but old school seat posts, and some people don't like that kind of style seat. This kind of style seat post is a rigid, and it doesn't move at all. You know, the only way it moves is through let's hop on the other side, is by loosening the seat post clamp. So you would loosen this, and you can adjust the height on this post as well, but on another one, on rigid seat posts. So that's how you can do that. And yeah, this is called a saddle. I always feel this is important to say this all the time. You know, you can always go to a bike shop and find, like, say, hey, I'd like to get my sit bones measured to make sure I'm sitting on the right width saddle, because actually, like, everybody's sit bones, you know, where their butt sits is, you know, everybody has different widths. So, you know, if you have wider sit bones, you want a wider saddle. If you have narrower ones, you'll probably be more comfortable on a narrower saddle. And this is kind of on the narrower end for me, but it's on the cusp of being the right fit. So, you know, for me, one of my favorite saddles is the SQ Labs saddle. But at this point, and budget wise, I have so many other projects. I haven't upgraded this yet, but it's at some point I will replace it. But it gets the job done, because I don't do long rides that are like over 3 hours. So this does the job just fine. I just like that extra comfort in the SQ Lab saddle, even though they're like roughly about, they're north of $100. Well, let's see. This is clearly a water bottle cage. Put your water bottle, or even some people put the storage toolkits in here. Believe it or not, I'm going to cover this part. So your cables run through these little black things, as people will call them sometimes, or they're different colors, but these are called cable housings. These cable housings protect your metal cables that are in here from the elements like rain, dirt, and stuff, and it keeps the operation of your stuff smooth, like here, like nice and crisp. Here, obviously, this is not a cable, there's fluid inside, so a lot more of an issue if you accidentally cut one of these, because then all the fluid's going to come out and your brake's not going to work, and you're going to be doing a Flintstone stop, or you're jumping off the bike and it whatever. But not a good ideal situation to be in. And also here, it's another through axle in the back, and of course pop quiz, rotor, and brake caliper, and this is just for the rear. This would be considered a chain. This part, this round part with the teeth, as I discussed, the teeth is the chain ring here, and this is a chain guide. This just prevents my chain from falling off. I haven't had an issue, but I got one of these for fun. Thought it'd look cool. And and then this part that my finger's running across, including this part here, these are called crank arms. So this would be a drive side crank arm, and the way to remember a drive side crank arm is it has a chain ring that drives the bike, right? So drive side, and that's the non-drive side. And for those of you that are wondering, because sometimes you'll get bike parts right and they'll say right side or it'll say left side, and you're like, which one's the right, which one's the left? So if you remember, right side for a bike, just sit on it, right side, left side. Right side is the drive side, because you'll see the chain and everything. So that's an easy way to remember it. And then non-drive side's the left side, and as you can tell, there's no chain, or like unlike this side, you know, there's none of the gearing. Now let's pop back here, because I think it's a little more clear. So on a frame, this is called like where my fingers are. It's a bottom bracket shell, this metal piece in the frame. This holds, if you can, where my finger's on now, and even on the other side where my finger's on, that's called a bottom bracket. This helps the gears, as you can tell, check it out, move. I'm pedaling it backwards because obviously if I can't pedal it, I can't move it forward because it's locked in place. But this helps make the pedaling, because there's bearings in the bottom bracket. It helps it helps your pedaling like efficiency by a lot. You know, if if it didn't have bearings, it was just all friction based, it'd be a very it wouldn't be as enjoyable or efficient as a ride. So the bottom bracket has bearings in here as well as some other mechanisms, but it's primarily these are bearings, and there's different types of bottom brackets, and there's different types of bottom bracket shell widths in a frame. So shell widths could be 68 or 73, those are the most common ones. Here, this is an external. There's old school bikes, they even have like an English bottom bracket. I mean, there's just so many different bottom brackets. Today's most contemporary bikes will have this style of bottom bracket. You know, it's an external cup on, and it's threaded. Some do press fit, and I don't think I'm not a big fan of it in mountain biking, because they tend, if you ride hard, they will come loose. Like, there's no denying that. I've even had people who are bike fabricators admit that. You know, the reason press fit does exist for a lot of bikes is it's, believe it or not, it's just cheaper, because you don't have to it's actually cheaper to make, because you just punch a hole in the frame to a certain tolerance, and then you can just press these in. And you know, with threadeds, they require a little more extra work. You know, I hear that from a lot of fabricators. So it's an expert opinion. It's not like you're asking for COVID advice from a person who can't differentiate viruses from bacteria, but I digress, you know, on that. But anyway, this is the bike education series, episode 1. Hopefully you guys and it was useful. You know, if any folks have any questions, you know, always let me know. I just thought it would be fun to do this series, because I know a lot of people are buying bikes, especially during COVID, and they want to learn more, they want to know more. So just remember that if you have friends that are like, I want to know more about my bike, send them the link, share this channel, smash that like button. I'm kidding, everybody says that, it just drives me crazy. But anyway, I thought this would be kind of the beginning. I entertain doing this because I know a lot of people are curious about bikes. So stay tuned. My next one is what to look for on a used bike, or even a new bike, if you're buying, if you're going, especially the used bike market. So stay tuned for that. Again, thanks for hanging out, watching episode 1 of the Bike Ed 101 series, brought to you by Yuri on YouTube. I don't know. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Hang in there, ask me questions, whatever. Talk to you later. Bye.